everyone would be there. Richard's siblings, their spouses, cousins, nieces, and nephews. It was a time to reconnect, to celebrate family history. And for Richard, a chance to present himself as the successful man with the perfect family. But Maria saw it differently. She saw it as her opportunity to expose the truth in front of the people who mattered most to Richard. She played along with the preparations, keeping up appearances as the devoted wife, but inside she was preparing for something far bigger. By now, her collection of evidence was complete. She had hours of footage, voice recordings, and even text messages from Richard's phone, all pointing to his affair with Lisa. There would be no room for denial. Maria decided that the family reunion would be the place where everything would come to light. She had stayed silent for long enough. She had gathered enough proof to ensure that when the truth came out, there would be no doubt left in anyone's mind. She would not only expose Richard's betrayal, but make sure he felt the full weight of his actions in front of the people who thought they knew him best. The morning of July 4th was bright and warm, with the scent of fresh-cut grass filling the air. Richard's parents' estate was the perfect setting for the reunion. A sprawling backyard, with tall oak trees providing shade, picnic tables set up for the feast, and children running around in excitement. Maria arrived with Richard and the kids, keeping her expression neutral, even though her heart raced with anticipation. She had already prepared the USB drive, containing a carefully edited compilation of the videos and recordings she had collected over the past few months. The day unfolded as expected, with laughter, shared stories, and the smell of barbecue wafting through the air. Richard played the role of the doting father and successful businessman, mingling with his family, unaware that the clock was ticking on his facade. Maria stayed close to their children, watching everything from the sidelines, her mind calm and focused. She had to time this perfectly. As the sun began to set and the family gathered indoors for their traditional slideshow, Maria knew the moment had arrived. The living room was filled with Richard's relatives. Everyone settled comfortably in their seats, ready to watch the yearly compilation of family memories. Maria felt her pulse quicken, but maintained her composure. She stood quietly in the back as Richard's father set up the projector and connected the laptop to the screen. As soon as the room was darkened and all eyes were on the screen, Maria made her move. She approached the laptop under the guise of adjusting the settings and quietly slipped her USB drive into the port. She navigated through the files quickly, ensuring no one noticed the switch. Then, with a steady hand, she pressed play. She had crafted this plan so carefully, waiting for the perfect moment. And now, surrounded by Richard's entire family, there would be no escape. The room grew quiet as the projector clicked on. The familiar whirring of the machine filled the space, and all eyes turned toward the screen. Richard's father, always the organizer of the reunion, smiled and nodded toward Maria, thinking she had prepared something special for the family. A tribute, perhaps. But what played on the screen was not the happy, smiling family moments everyone expected. Instead, the grainy footage flickered to life, and the room fell into a stunned silence. On the screen, Richard appeared, clear enough for everyone to recognize. But he wasn't alone. Lisa was there, her presence unmistakable. The footage, though not perfect in quality, showed them together in the intimacy of their home. Richard had believed he was safe, But Maria had captured every detail: the tender touches, the stolen kisses, the whispered words. The silence in the room became suffocating. At first, no one could fully comprehend what they were watching. The images on the screen shattered the carefully constructed image Richard had built over the years. There was a collective gasp, and the whispers began. Faces that had been filled with admiration now twisted in confusion and shock. Richard, frozen in his seat, turned pale. The weight of what was happening crashed down on him like a tidal wave. He tried to stand, but his legs felt weak beneath him. He shot a panicked glance toward Maria, realizing too late that he had underestimated her. He had believed she would stay quiet, that her love for the children and her desire for a stable family would keep her silent forever. But Maria had found her voice, and now there was no stopping what she had set in motion. As the footage continued, Richard leapt from his chair, rushing toward the laptop in a desperate attempt to stop the video. But Maria had positioned herself between him and the screen. She stood firm, blocking him, her eyes cold and unyielding. She didn't need to speak. Her presence was enough to let him know that this was far from over. The footage played on, transitioning to the audio recordings she had meticulously collected. The room filled with the sound of Richard's voice, sweet-talking Lisa, making promises, completely unaware that every word was being recorded. The weight of his actions hit him harder with every passing second. He had thought he could control everything, but Maria had outplayed him in every way. The atmosphere in the room shifted from shock to disgust. Richard's family, once his greatest supporters, now looked at him with disbelief and shame. His parents sat rigid, unable to speak, unable to even look at their son. His siblings exchanged glances, trying to reconcile the man they thought they knew with the one exposed on the screen. James, Richard's eldest brother, stood up as Richard lunged at Maria in a fit of rage, trying to silence her. But James was quicker, stepping in to hold Richard back. Even in his anger, Richard could not escape the growing sense that everything was falling apart. Maria's calmness was unnerving. She had anticipated every reaction, every possible outcome, and she remained steady, even as Richard's world crumbled around him. When the last recording ended and the silence returned to the room, Maria reached into her bag. With the same steady hand, she pulled out the divorce papers. She had prepared them weeks ago, knowing this moment would come. Without a word, she threw them at Richard's feet. Her terms were clear. She would take full custody of the children, and Richard would lose half of everything they had built together. There was no negotiation, no room for him to argue. The evidence was irrefutable, and now there was no turning back. The next few weeks became a nightmare for Richard. The consequences of his actions began to unravel faster than he could grasp. Maria, armed with undeniable evidence, moved swiftly through the legal process. In court, Richard's attempts to fight for custody were weak and ineffective. He had no defense. The judge, presented with hours of footage and audio recordings, had no choice but to side with Maria. On August 15, 2012, the court awarded Maria full custody of the children. Richard would lose half of their assets, and he was ordered to pay monthly child support. The judge was firm, warning him that any missed payment would result in jail time. His life, once so stable and respected, had completely fallen apart. As the weeks went by, Richard's position in the family crumbled as well. His parents, once his greatest allies, could no longer look at him the same way. His siblings distanced themselves, ashamed of the scandal that had rocked their family. Richard, once a man who had everything, was now isolated and alone. For Maria, though the process had been painful, there was a sense of relief. She had spent years being the perfect wife, sacrificing her own happiness for the sake of their family. But now she was free. Free from the lies, the deception, and the constant heartbreak. She moved forward, focusing on her children and building a new life for them. Richard, on the other hand, spiraled into self-destruction. The affair had cost him everything: his family, his reputation, and his dignity. Every month, as he paid the court-ordered child support, he was reminded of the moment he lost it all. His bitterness consumed him, and he struggled to find a way back to the life he once had. But Maria had moved on. Surrounded by her children and the support of her community, she found strength in the very people Richard had disregarded. Though the scars of the past would remain, Maria had reclaimed her life. She no longer needed to be the perfect wife. She was finally free to be herself. Richard, left alone to live with the consequences of his choices, would forever be haunted by the memories of the day. His lies were exposed for the world to see. What had been a perfect facade of family unity turned into a scandal that would haunt Richard forever. The reunion would be remembered not for celebration, but for betrayal and the devastating consequences of one man's unfaithfulness. And for Maria, though the pain still lingered, she emerged stronger, free from the chains of a loveless marriage, and finally ready to reclaim her life.